Okay, here we go. So the recording just started. For those of you who don't know me, I'll introduce myself real quick, and then we will get into kind of some of your own personal backstories before we get into the workshop itself. So again, my name is Luke Gordon. I'm a physical therapist and the owner of Gordon Physical Therapy in Spokane Valley. And we do a lot of different things in terms of outpatient physical therapy, from things like knee pain and shoulder pain and lower back and sciatic nerve pain, post-operative care. But balance and fall prevention is definitely one of the biggest things we help people with, especially seniors, but honestly, anyone who needs help with their balance. But it's a very, very important topic, which we'll dive into in just a minute here. Before I do that, I'd like to give people the opportunity just to kind of give us, kind of your 30 to 60-second backstory with falls and why it's a concern for you. So if you want to just share real quick, I'll call you out by name, but if you've had a fall, and or what you're looking to accomplish with the workshop. So Walter, do you want to go first and just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, Spokane Valley, with Parkinson's, which contributes to falls. 82 years old, contributes to falls. It hurts.
Yeah. And have you had some falls then, Walter?
Yes,
Okay. And Parkinson's is a kind of a specific factor, isn't it, in terms of how it affects you?
yes,
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit about that today as well. And certainly if anyone has specific questions as we go, just feel free to ask them anytime.
sure.
Okay, Sue, do you want to share a little about yourself as well?
Okay.
Yeah.
I live here in Spokane Valley, and let's see. I was born with a defect, and so I have one leg that is kind of problemsome anyway. But so I have a tendency to. It seems to be weaker, and I don't always pick up my toes, and so I trip myself with that, particularly with that leg. And so we were in Thailand for the winter, getting away from the cold.
Nice.
And I was there for a couple of months. And I, for the most part, the pavement was good, but there were some up and down breaking points and entryways on sidewalks and so forth. And I managed to fall down twice. And I've
Ooh,
never done that frequently. I mean, I was there for 2 months and I celebrated each month with a fall. So that
geez.
was concerning to me. The last fall that I did, I landed on my face and twisted my glasses. Thank goodness I brought some additional glasses. But I was kind of put myself in isolation so that I wouldn't have to share with everybody what my face looked like.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was definitely a wake up call. And so I just need to know how to strengthen myself and how to better take care of myself so that I can try to prevent as many falls as possible.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And Sue, is it fair to say that you're pretty active?
I try to be active. I can be very sedentary very easily.
Okay. Okay.
So, which I've learned is actually weakens myself. I'm kind of that
Mhm.
mentality that if I get myself strong, then okay, that's taken care of, and that will just continue.
Okay. Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
work at it anymore.
Right. Right.
So I'm learning the hard way that it doesn't work that way.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Thanks for sharing that, Sue. Yeah. The next one on my screen is SJ Kirk. Um, hello there.
Hi, my name
How are
is
you?
Susan.
Susan?
Yes, and I live in Spokane. I'm in a senior retirement center,
Okay.
and I don't fall down, but I feel very unstable sometimes. I use walking poles if I'm going any distance, and I play golf once a week. Last summer, I had a nasty plantar fasciitis in my left foot. And as a consequence, I stayed off my feet as much as possible for 6 months, and now my right knee is killing me.
Okay.
I just don't have the strength to put weight on it or go up and down steps on it. And it makes me unstable. I take a balance class where I live, and this morning I felt very unstable with the exercises she was trying to have us do. So I think as much as anything, I need strength.
Mhm.
So that's where I am.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. You made a good point. One of the things we'll talk about later today is how different types of pain can negatively affect your balance. Okay, great. Bob, do you want to share your story real quick too?
Sure. I live in St. Mary's, Idaho, and the worst fall I had was I was visiting down in Santa Barbara and walking along. I was admiring the flowers and all this stuff, and I wasn't watching where I was walking. And it was only like a less than an inch raised sidewalk, and I caught my toe on it and fell. But I find myself having to be aware of how much I'm lifting my feet, because I catch my toe every so often on things, especially my right foot. And so anyway, I'm always aware, or I try to be aware of it, but I catch myself every once in a while that think, oh man, I could have fallen on that, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of how, and I read your columns all the time, and so I thought this could maybe help.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one of the things I want to highlight for someone like you, Bob, who again, pretty mobile, right? You just worry about catching your feet sometimes, is that
Yeah.
there's a big difference between having pretty solid, like static balance where you're just standing still and you can stand on both legs and
Yeah.
do some things that way. And then dynamic balance, which is when you're out in the community going up and down curb, uneven surfaces, potentially in a busier environment where there's visual stimulation or people are talking to you, or like you said, you're looking at the flowers. That's a much higher level of balance. And people can get to that too, but you just have to have a different approach, So a lot of times, if you just test your balance, like even the stuff that I've given out so far is pretty basic stuff. You could master that and still have a decent fall risk, because when you're actually moving in again, a busier, more dynamic environment, it's a different level of skill and reaction speeds that you need. So I'll try to talk about that a little bit as we go. But for now, just know that that is definitely something to think about. Yeah. Okay, Jan, you're up next.
Thanks for doing this, Luke.
Yeah.
I've been at physical therapy for little things through the years, ankles and that kind of stuff. I am in my early 70s, and I just have had several times when I've fallen. I feel like it's always been with, if you could say it, with good reason, some ice or lip, like you were saying, Bob. But I just in general want to be more aware of what I should do to take care of myself. And I have already begun to try to be just more mindful, going up and down stairs, curbs, things like that, just in general, because I don't want to fall. So that's where I'm at.
Good. Thanks, Jan. Carol, did you want to share next?
I'm Carol, and I just moved to senior living. I have been working with PT on my balance, and for about 6 months, I got much better. And then I had an episode of vertigo, and I am still building back up to where I was. So I just want to see, I have never fallen, but I am very careful that
Good for
I
you.
don't fall. And I use a walker full time.
Did we help you with your vertigo, Carol, or is that somebody else?
No, I've been seeing Stacey Adams.
Okay, good. Yeah, so she helped you out. Okay, good. I'm glad you got in with her. Stacy works for us. Yeah. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Carol. David, I know you don't have a mic, so we'll skip you. Galaxy Tab A7 Lite, are you there? Okay, we'll skip that one. Mary, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Mary. I am 72. I have never fallen. I am mindful that I am 72. I love handrails. I exercise daily. I have a vibration plate machine. I'm on 10 minutes a day, and I do at least 6 flights of stairs also. I just don't want to fall.
Oh,
I
good.
haven't yet.
Just being ahead of the curve then, huh?
I'm trying.
Awesome. Perfect, perfect. Great. Thank you all for sharing. I think it really helps kind of set the stage for some similarities, some commonalities with already having falls versus how the falls are happening and wanting to avoid obviously as many falls in the future as possible. One more quick thing before I dive in. Did anyone have a chance to print off the worksheet? Okay, if you got it, great. We'll fill it out as we go along. If you didn't, don't worry about it. I'll email it out later with all the answers. But if you want to take some notes on a scratch piece of paper or something, that's just fine. Usually I would have emailed or mailed all of these out in advance, but we ran into some staffing issues, which seems to be the thing nowadays with most small businesses. And we just kind of dropped the ball on mailing them out. So anyhow, the first thing on my worksheet that I want to talk about is what I call the downward spiral of having a fall. If you've already kind of read my newspaper articles, I talk about that at the very beginning of this series that I put together, which is basically when you have a fall or someone you know has a fall, oftentimes it can seem like just an isolated event, meaning that you may not have gotten hurt or anything like that, but it can actually lead to a lot of different things over time. So anyone who's had a recent fall, Sue, I might pick on you since you just mentioned you had a fall. What were the thoughts or the emotions going through your head and your body when you fell?
Well, at first I noticed that I was bleeding pretty profusely. And then, of course, I was actually a passerby, when we were walking, a passerby came back and picked me up, helped me get up. So that was really, really nice. I didn't have to try to do that myself. But I realized that I was unsteady and it was hard to walk.
Yeah.
There was a woman that came out of a business that I fell in front of, and she nursed me. I mean, it was great.
Yeah.
Couldn't have asked for better help.
Yeah.
She said, well, come over here. Well, you know, I was very unsteady on my feet, of course, and I was shaken up, you know.
Yeah.
Is that what you
Yeah.
want, Dan?
That
Okay.
helps. Yeah. And I think most of you who've had a fall can probably appreciate that. Yeah, one of the emotions that usually fall comes after that is just fear, right? So
Yeah.
you know, obviously immediately you're afraid, you know, did I get hurt? Did I not get hurt? And then going forward, it can be scary, you know, thinking about having another fall or trying to avoid it. So where this gets into that downward spiral, like I mentioned, is that one fall can lead to fear of another fall. And when you're afraid of certain activities that might cause a fall, what do you think you guys are most willing to do regarding those activities?
Not do them.
Stay away.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You tend to stay away from them. So, and when you start avoiding activities that might cause you to have a fall, what happens to your body over that period of time?
For me, it's weakened.
Yes,
Right.
you lose strength.
Exactly. So now you lose strength, and it all could have started with just one fall, right? Or multiple falls, but you start to lose strength because you are avoiding activities that challenge you. And then I think you're also losing, you start to lose your balance ability. So you're not as sharp anymore. So that's kind of the downward spiral. And as you lose strength and your balance becomes a little bit, you know, less reactive or less, what would you call it? Just less responsive. That's the word I was looking for. Do you think you're more likely to have a fall or less likely to have a fall?
Or
Likely.
More likely, exactly. So one seemingly isolated event can over time, you know, over the course of 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years, can start to really slowly spiral into now you get to this point where you wake up one day and say, wow, my balance is really bad. I'm unstable. I'm afraid of doing these things. And what usually goes along with that is some level of anxiety and depression too. If you like going to walk with your friends or your spouse and get outside and get the fresh air, and all of a sudden you don't feel like you can do that, that's going to weigh on you mentally, right? Or if you like to go dancing, or you like pickleball, whatever it is, people start missing out on things they really enjoy. And that's why I think this topic of balance and fall prevention is so important. Because it can have a significant impact on your quality of life. So, does that set the stage for everybody?
Yeah.
Are you with me?
Yep.
Okay, good. So that's the problem. Let's spend the next, 40 minutes or so trying to talk about more details on what causes these problems and then solutions as well. So we're going to start off with my next thing on the worksheet. For those of you that have it, is just higher level view of the 3 steps it takes to maintain your balance and basically avoid a fall. So step 1 is that we're constantly receiving input from our environment. So step 1 is your body's ability to sense your balance. To sense your balance in relationship to your environment. So if you have the worksheet, those 2 blanks are sense, not dollars and cents, but sense, S-E-N-S-E. And then the second one is environment. So your body has to be able to sense these things, which we'll talk about how it does that in just a minute. And then it's going to send that information to your brain. Much of this information is going to your brain constantly, very rapidly. So that's step 1. Step 2 then, once the information gets to your brain, is that your brain has to process that information. Sounds easy, but we'll talk about later on how things like neurological things like Parkinson's, like Walter mentioned, that stuff can kind of not always process correctly, or it cannot complete step 3 as well, which is step 3 is your body's ability to respond. Respond and make any necessary corrections. So again, very bird's eye view, very oversimplified, lots of sensory input coming in. Your body has to sense the information, sends it to your brain has to process it, and then you're going to get signals out to your body telling yourself how to respond. Does that generally make sense to people?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes. Mhm.
And again, we'll kind of pick this apart as we go along and see where things break down, which is also where we have the opportunity to improve things too. Okay, so we mentioned all of your bodies, your body is sensing this information. Let's talk about where that sensation comes from, and that's the 3 balance systems. So that's the next thing on my list, 3 balance systems. The first one, has anyone ever noticed how it's harder to balance when you close your eyes?
Yes.
Yep. Or if you get up at night and it's dark and you can't see well, how sometimes you're a little more unsteady. Okay, that's because one of your primary balance systems is your vision. So the first of those 3 systems is your vision. Now, with my eyes open, I'm constantly, very quickly absorbing tons of information all the time. And when I move around, I move my head, everything in my visual field is moving. And again, it's very rapid input from my eyes to my brain constantly. If you're walking towards me or I'm in a busy environment, like all this stuff is being processed very rapidly. And that's a big part of your vision. So that's why, or sorry, that's a big part of your balance. So that's why it gets harder to balance when your eyes are closed. So that's your first one. Your second one then is the sensation. So for those of you who have good sensation in your feet, you might notice that you can feel your weight. There's a lot of pressure. And if you shift, to your left, shift to your right, shift forward, back, anywhere in that kind of 3-dimensional realm, you'll feel your weight shifting along your feet. So that's the main thing that I think of when I say sensation, but you also have other types of sensation like proprioception, which basically just means that there's other types of sensation going to your brain through like stretch receptors in your muscles and different receptors in your joints and tissue there too. So that's your second balance system. Your third one then, third one is a two-word one. Anyone want to take a guess what your third balance system is? Or if you already read my article, go ahead and just shout it out.
If I can remember.
Is it inner ear?
Inner ear. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
Jan, you win the prize.
Yay.
Yes, I'll give you a
Free
high five
hearing
when I see
aids.
you. There you go. Yeah, so your inner ear. You'll often hear this called your vestibular system. When we talk about vertigo later, we'll talk about how things can go wrong with the inner ear. But simply put, there's a couple different organs in your inner ear. The most common one that you'll hear talk about is your canals. So we call them semicircular canals. They're basically these fluid-filled hoops that when you move your head, the fluid is moving in these hoops. It's pretty cool. So whenever you're moving, that fluid is moving and it's sending feedback to your brain, telling you where you're moving in relationship to space. So that's a cool one. Anyone remember like spinning around in circles when they were a kid? I'm guessing most people haven't done that recently. At least not on purpose. Yeah. No, so
When
you'd
you have vertigo, it feels like that.
yes, it does. Yes, yes, except you weren't trying, right?
No.
So when you were a kid and you would spin, and then you'd start spinning and that fluid would really get moving in your inner ear, and then you would stop and the fluid would keep moving because you've been spinning. And so then you had the sensation that you were still moving, right? So the world seemed like it was still moving around you. Whereas when you just tip your head or turn your head a little bit, as soon as you stop, the fluid stops and you don't have that sensation of spinning or vertigo, like Carol said. So that's your inner ears in a nutshell. We'll talk more about vertigo here in a little bit. And if anyone has specific questions when we get to vertigo, I'm happy to go through that. Okay, any questions so far then? Three balance systems, vision, sensation, and inner ear. All righty. Okay, we'll keep cruising. So just to kind of get a better understanding of all the things that can affect our balance, both negatively and positively, the next section I have is just a bunch of other factors that you want to consider when you're trying to get a better understanding of your balance and also when you're trying to pinpoint ways that you can improve it. So the first one I have on this list then is you could have damage to your central nervous system. Walter, how familiar are you with Parkinson's and what it actually does?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the parts of the brain that are damaged with Parkinson's?
I'm not sure.
Okay. There's no test on it or anything. I was just curious. So Parkinson's is a good example of a neurological condition where now you have damage to a part of your brain. It's the basal ganglia, and they're responsible for helping with smooth motor patterns. So that's one example of if you have damage to your central nervous system, that's a factor you have to consider when you're trying to improve your balance. In the case of Parkinson's, there's very specific balances that we found are really beneficial for Parkinson's. They're usually big movements, very like exaggerated movements, lots of repetition. And then when you get into more advanced Parkinson's training, you're also working with what we call dual tasking, which is where you're doing big movements, but they're also like asking you questions, or they're making you, call out numbers and colors and things like that.
Very difficult. Very
Yeah.
difficult.
Yes, they like to challenge you.
Count backwards from 10. It's
Yes,
tough enough.
yeah, while you're
Okay.
moving. Yes, yep, it's pretty challenging. So again, things to consider. Other types of central nervous system damage, MS is pretty common. So that's one you have to consider. The other common one that we see would be strokes.
Yeah.
And then we do have some therapists that also work with spinal cord injuries. So that's much less common, but things like Parkinson's, MS, and stroke are fairly common, unfortunately. So again, just things you have to consider when you're designing a treatment plan. What are the factors you're working with? The next one is super common, and that is limited strength. Limited strength, and then of course, endurance and flexibility. Several of you mentioned, you don't feel strong, or you don't feel stable, or by not doing as much activity that you're going to get weak, right? I think everyone appreciates that concept, but it doesn't always make it easier to reverse. But so the reason that strength is so important with balance is because we go back to what we first talked about. Step 3 of maintaining your balance is how well can you respond? Now, if you've got really good strength in your ankles and your knees and your hips, your ability to respond should be pretty good. But over time, if you've developed some weakness in those muscles, or they're just not used to being called upon for quick, sudden movements, then that's going to be one factor that you want to try to improve your balance. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
good. So again, strength is just one factor, but almost everyone on this call, if I were to test your muscle strength, again, especially ankles, knees, and hips and core is usually the biggest one. Most likely I'd find weakness in all of you. It's somewhere, which is, you know, a bad thing, but it's also the silver lining is that we can usually improve that. And you know how PTs roll. We like to find weaknesses in everybody and then push them. Okay, great. So that was the second bullet point ad. The next one I have is a 2-word one. Anyone with the sheet, the last 2 words are from medications. What do you think the first 2 words are? Blank, blank from medications.
Side effects.
Exercise.
Side effects. Yes. Nice
What is
job,
it?
Gina. Side effects from
Oh, side
medications. Right. So, you know, you hear a lot of medication advertisements on TV and the radio. Side effects at the very end when the person talks like really fast. Side effects may include boom, 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 boom. There's a lot of drugs that say side effects include dizziness, lightheadedness, things like that. So if those are some of the symptoms that you're having that are potentially affecting your balance, it's always good to have that conversation with your pharmacist and or your doctor and say, hey, am I having side effects or medications? Is there something that can be improved? Or, I mean, are you dizzy and lightheaded because you're on a blood pressure medication? Your blood pressure is now too low. So these are good things to consider because they're well within our control to adjust and change.
Yeah.
So again, just think of that on your laundry list of things that you could potentially improve.
Yes.
Okay, and then lastly, I've got a really important one, I think, which is ongoing pain. Susan, that was you earlier that mentioned that you had pain, right?
Yes.
Will you recap that again and how pain kind of led to some of these issues?
Yeah, I had plantar fasciitis, which meant I could not put weight on my left foot. So I walked very little and my right leg did all the work. And when the plantar fasciitis finally lightened up, I found out that my knee on the right side was very sore.
Yeah, I'm just jotting this down. So a couple things I want to highlight. Thank you for sharing that, Susan, because that's perfect. So Susan had pain on her left foot. Naturally, what she's going to do when she walks is she's going to start to shift her weight to the right, correct?
Yep, that's right.
So she shifts her weight to the right. What do you think is happening to her left leg that entire time?
Weaker.
The left leg is now getting weaker and weaker because the pain is making it harder and harder for Susan to use the left leg. She's also walking less, what she said, right? So she's walking less overall. So what's happening to her entire body?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's getting weak.
So the whole body's getting weaker. And then
Getting weaker
balance
and gaining weight.
and gaining weight. Yep. And feeling more unstable the whole time. Because, you know, one of the true kind of idioms in life is use it or lose it. If you don't consistently challenge your balance, you will lose it. Slowly, but you'll lose it. And then to cap it all off, now you end up with right knee pain because your right leg was doing comparatively too much.
Yep.
So this is why I think pain is so important. You could apply this to almost any type of pain. Like I said earlier, lower back pain and sciatic nerve pain is super common. So if you have ongoing pain there and you can't be as active as you want to be, or you're constantly shifting your weight more to one side than the other, this is going to compound over time and have a negative impact on your balance. Now, the reason I bring this up is because most types of pain are treatable. So if you wake up saying, gosh, I really need to improve my balance, and you also know if you've got pain in one or two areas, factor that into your plan to improve your balance. Because if you can get rid of the plantar fascia pain, the knee pain, the hip bursitis type pain that we see so commonly, the lower back and sciatic nerve pain, if you can get rid of those completely, or at the very least take them down by 20–30%, then you've got a better chance of improving your balance.
Point.
That little monologue makes sense.
What about
Okay.
arthritis? What about arthritis in a particular knee?
Arthritis,
any-
yeah.
Yeah,
So there are things you can do to have a positive impact on, knee arthritis. Not necessarily the structural changes with arthritis, but the pain level and inflammation.
right.
Which I'll talk about a few things. I mentioned neuropathy on this bullet point too. Neuropathy can have a real negative impact on people,
Right.
both because of the pain, but also because of the numbness.
Yeah.
And I'll come back. I'll kind of make this full circle, Gina. But so pain in and of itself that we're talking about makes life difficult. You do less, you walk less, your balance goes
Yes.
down from there.
Yes.
Numbness, like with neuropathy, the second balance system we have is sensation, right? So if your feet
Right.
feel numb and you're shifting your weight around and you really can't feel it, that has a negative impact on your balance because you're not getting that level of sensory input. And then especially if you close your eyes and you have numbness in your feet, all that's left of those three systems is your inner ear.
Oh, wow.
So now you're really unstable. So going back to pain and neuropathy, there's things you can do to improve those things. Personally, well-tolerated exercise is always good for everything. I usually think of like aquatic therapy as one of the most well-tolerated exercises for people if they have lots of pain. So that's a good route to go. And then my other big one is that the most success I've ever seen with people reducing neuropathy pain and just widespread pain in their body is for them to have an extremely low blood sugar diet approach. So
Okay.
you'd be surprised how powerful that really is. And I know no one wants to hear me talk about how you need to eat healthier and lose weight and all these things, but it really works better than anything else. It works better than any drug I've ever seen. It works better than any amount of physical therapy I've ever seen. It just works. So if you can consistently cut out refined processed sugars, refined carbohydrates, and you can focus more on things like healthy vegetables, healthy fruits, and healthy meat and protein, healthy fats too, your blood glucose level will lower. And over time, it has a very positive impact on inflammation and blood flow. And Jan, I know you're smiling over there. I didn't even realize, I don't think I realized until today that you're joining me. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Well, my husband and I both participated in the 2030 weight loss program with Luke, and especially his blood sugar was reduced from, if you're familiar with blood or diabetic information, his A1C was reduced to 5.9, so he's just under the beginning of diabetes, but he was already diabetic and on multiple medications, and he's reduced his medication and he feels so much better. He lost 20 pounds, but he's dealt with a lot of back pain, a couple back surgeries, and a lot of leg nerve pain. And all of those have been greatly helped by the weight loss and the low sugar, healthier diet. I've lost almost 50 pounds it was 100 days yesterday, I realized, Luke. That was kind of cool.
Wow.
And in general, inflammation, the difference is wonderful and amazing. And the flexibility and going up and down stairs, there's so many things that have been really, really helpful with this. A lot of other things too so anyway, I'm continuing with the program and continuing to lose weight. And it's not just weight loss, which is wonderful, but it's also the healthier diet in general. So it really, really does make a difference. All the things that you're saying.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. And again, I'm not trying to pull a fast one on anybody and say, hey,
No.
you came for balance and now I'm going to try to talk about weight loss. But
No.
really, there's there's a lot of people who just have inflammation. Again, your knees hurt. How are you supposed to exercise when your knees are chronically sore? You know, you can do
Yeah.
aquatic therapy. It's a good thing. But the average person, like Jan was saying, and her husband, Tom, super active guy. I mean, before he joined the program, he was already walking 4 or 5 miles a day or hiking. Like he's crazy active, but the pain was always there. And his blood sugar, I think, was averaging like 160 was his average range. And
That's
he's
high.
taking lots of insulin. And now he's cut his insulin in half and he's averaging closer to 100. So it's like,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden, it took a couple months, but all of a sudden that nerve pain now is finally getting better.
Much better.
So it's just amazing sometimes the impact you can have just by changing your food. It's pretty remarkable. And again, I don't see anything else working for neuropathy on a consistent basis. There's a lot of like high dollar, like laser treatments and stuff like that. There's some medications, you know, like the gabapentins and the Lyrica, which of course have lots of side effects, and they really don't ever do much in terms of my experience. Again, not a medical doctor, I can't give you medication advice, but I can tell you that people that can consistently lower that level of inflammation and blood sugar feel dramatically better across the board. So, all right. Had to throw it out there. Thanks for sharing there, Jan. Okay, great. Any questions so far? 3 balance systems, other factors that affect your balance. Any questions so far?
Well, basically just, and this might be another class you're having, but just what exercises would be good to do every day to encourage my balance.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get into that in just a minute, Gina.
Sure.
We're going to talk, we'll talk about treatment here kind of on the second half. We're almost there. Vertigo is my next thing on my list. Do people want to hear about vertigo? Should I go through it real quick?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And my daughter went on a trip and flew quite a distance and fell asleep on the plane. And when she got off the plane, within 24 hours, she had crippling vertigo. And read an article about that you can get vertigo from flying, falling asleep and all the descending and all of that. And she was like deathly ill. She couldn't eat, move for about 3 days. She finally got to a pharmacy, and it was in a foreign country, and they actually have a cure for vertigo that they don't carry in the United States. And she took that particular med and was fine and was healed. But I don't think we have much here. If we get vertigo, maybe some meclizine, something like that. But
right.
Yeah, you start to feel desperate. What can you do, and how quickly can you do it if you get that?
Yeah.
Epley's maneuver worked for me. The first time I was actually admitted through the ER with vertigo because I woke up with it.
Yes.
And the first time the PT did Epley's maneuver, I really felt like I was on a carousel.
Yeah.
And after they did that, I felt so much better.
Yes.
I had I still have some residual, but I felt so much better after Epley's maneuver.
Yeah. So let me answer kind of both questions. So first off, vertigo is a sensation of spinning or movement. So people feel like they either feel like they're moving or the objects around them are moving. When in fact they're not. It often feels like spinning, but sometimes it can just feel like a general sense of like swaying and
yes, I felt both.
Yeah. The type that Carol had is the most common type that we help people with, which is BPPV. And that's the one that you may have heard, like the little rocks and crystals that get loose in your ear, and they float into those semicircular canals that we talked about earlier. So typically those semicircular canals are full of fluid, and these little crystals, we call them otoconia, they float in there basically from like a next door neighbor where they're usually stuck to a jelly pad, and they float in. And when that happens, now you have these crystals moving through your inner ear. And let's say you move your head, this way, the fluid stops, but then the fluid moves again because the crystal moves.
Mhm.
And that gives your brain the sensation that you're still moving when you're not. And so Gina, for your daughter, I'm not sure if she just had like a sinus issue where the pressure just built so hard that it like really freaked out her nerves. If she had BPPV and she just got unlucky and the crystals came to the wrong spot, typically, like Carol said, the most common treatment is the Epley maneuver, and that works really well.
Okay.
But you have to ask your daughter, like, what did she actually have? Was it the crystals that were out of alignment? It wouldn't be a drug, or it wouldn't be like a medication. But the Epley maneuver is for those inner ear crystals.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yes, it's just that the dreaded thought of ever waking up with something like that, you know. like,
Yeah,
what in the world? Yeah, so PT is what you're saying, or someone who knows how to do that epi maneuver. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So my
Right.
best advice, if you've never had vertigo, knock on
Yeah.
wood, say a prayer, do what you got to do. But
Yeah.
if you ever do wake up with it, just know that there are PTs that treat it.
Okay.
So there's two of us at the clinic, myself and Stacy, which Carol had Stacy, and then Joe helps us treat it too, actually. But
Joe also.
yeah. So we can treat it. Depending on where you live and stuff, there's a handful of PTs usually that will treat it.
Okay.
So just know that there is treatment for it because it's not fun. Usually it's like a sudden intense bout of it that lasts about 10-15 seconds and then it stops. Was that how yours was, Carol?
No, I woke up with it about 4 a.m, got up and had it, and then went back to bed and felt okay, and got up in the morning with it again.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I ended up going to the ER.
Yeah. And it can make you very nauseous.
Yes.
It can obviously trigger things like anxiety. So yeah. So again, just know that you can get help for that. So
Okay.
And Gina, if you figure out what that was that your daughter experienced and had, maybe send me an email or shoot me a text or something.
All I know is that until she got the medication, she couldn't eat, she couldn't get up, she couldn't hardly function. And and she travels, she's a world traveler. She actually works overseas.
Okay.
So I tried to see if they had that med here, and they do not.
Yeah, let me know what it is when you find out.
I'll send you the name of it. As a matter of fact, I might be able to pull it right now while you're talking.
That'd be great. Yeah, and like you said, they'll give you things like meclizine, which are basically anti
Yes.
like motion sickness, anti-nausea.
Yeah, that's the only thing I know that we can access here in the United States. This was something different.
It doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah, it'll cover some of the symptoms typically, but it won't take care of the crystals.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even cover the symptoms.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about my next one is the single biggest mistake people make with balance issues and vertigo, and then we'll talk more about treatment. The biggest one, which we all know is easy to do, is it's easy to ignore these problems when they come up, especially if they come up gradually. So, it's easy to ignore and think it's going to be temporary. And as we talked about, things just tend to gradually get worse. So that's the biggest mistake people make, is they just let it go for too long, try to ignore it, try to just kind of accommodate. Or they try to mask it, which masking it isn't quite the same as masking pain, although it can be. It's more like just working around it and, just kind of cutting out little things here and there. And then obviously our preference would be, as soon as you've got a balance issue, is that you should treat it. You should try to fix it and focus on as many of those factors as you can. So that's just kind of my lead into how do we successfully help people improve their balance, dizziness, vertigo, all those things. And again, I like to oversimplify it first, and then we can dive into more details. But the first step is really we need to determine the root cause of what's limiting your balance, making you more likely to fall. And more accurately, I would say it's not the root cause, it's the root causes. Very, very rarely is it one thing for most people. If we go back to the beginning, you have all of these factors. How well is your inner ear working? What's your strength like? Are you having pain? Are there any central nervous system things we need to think about? So you need to just look at all of those factors, determine which ones are needing improvement, which ones can be improved, and then target those. So that's step 2. we design it, you know, a PT program catered to your specific needs.
Sounds good.
So let me just walk you guys through then too, kind of the most typical person I'll see. They will usually have pain, so that's something for us to pay attention to, but they will also have limited strength and endurance, you know, cardiovascular endurance, and they'll also have inner ear weakness. So when we take them through basic balance testing, and let's say I had you all stand, you know, with your feet together and your eyes open, and you say, okay, that's pretty easy. Your eyes are open. You got lots of visual input. Your sensation hopefully is still giving you some feedback, and your inner ear is working to some extent. And then I say, okay, now we're all going to close our eyes. And all I've done then with those 3 balance systems is I've taken away your vision. So what do we have left? Hopefully still sensation, and hopefully still your inner ear is working. Now, for some people, just closing their eyes will make them go all over the place. Now, what that tells me as a PT is the inner ear really isn't doing much at all. So the inner ear has gotten weak. So we need to work on that. The next thing we would do for a very basic balance test is say, okay, you did okay with those first 2, you did well. You know, you swayed around a little bit when you close your eyes, but you're able to correct. That's great. So that's normal at this point. So then I put you on a piece of like squishy foam. Say, okay, same thing. Feet together on the foam with your eyes open. You know, maybe you're bouncing around a little bit, but it's still pretty easy. That'd be like the 3rd basic test I would do. And the 4th one is I say, close your eyes. And then for a lot of people, they're going all over the place. For some people, they're just falling right over. They're not falling when I'm there. You know, I grab onto them. But without me there or without opening their eyes, they're going to fall. And so that basically just tells us we got some work to do. In that case, the inner ear is doing next to nothing simply because it hasn't been challenged with it in a long time, because we've been very reliant on our vision. And so those are things that we can work on safely in the PT clinic. We can start to use the inner ear again. And I call it like strengthening the inner ear, but it's not really a muscle. It's neurological. So just by using it, the nerve pathways get better, they get more efficient, they get built back up again, which is cool because that happens a lot faster than building muscle. So we can work on that. And then, you know, when you're on the foam, when you're bouncing around, now you got all these muscles that are trying to twitch and they're trying to turn on. You got all these little ankle muscles that are trying to like roll and, you know, turn your feet to keep you in balance. With bigger movements, you'll notice your hips and your core get more into kind of the motion as well. So those are all things that we can use not only for baseline testing, but also for treatment. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, I give you back my usual patient. We're going to do some balance exercises in the clinic. And that is an example of pretty basic static balance. I'm not asking you to step over a cone or, you know, step up and down from the stairs or stand on one leg and lift your other knee. Like I mentioned with Walter earlier, we're not having you yet do like big movements and count backwards by 7s from 100. So the point there is we can make it much harder than that. And then, you know, we mentioned strength. The average person I'm going to see at this point in the game has weakness somewhere. Most likely hips and core are probably the worst you'll see. So we test all those muscles out. We say, okay, you know, Gina, I want you to lay on your side and lift your leg up to the side to work on those hip muscles. Or I want you to do our beloved clamshells, you know, which is you laying on your side and making a clamshell with your leg. So you want to do targeted strengthening.
Yeah.
You ask for other exercises. I mean, there's a lot of good exercises. Squats are great if you can get into that, you know, get to that point where you can do that. If you've got knee pain and back pain, we've got to teach you how to do it the right way so you don't make your pain worse. Yeah, there's all sorts of ways we can do it. So the other thing I wanted to mention, and Bob, I think you mentioned this, where did you trip on a curb? Is that how you fell, Bob? No, Bob might be frozen. Who else was that had tripped? Sue, was that you, Sue?
Yeah, I have a tendency to stub my toes.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if there's an object involved. I mean, I can do it all by myself.
Yeah, yeah, gotcha. So little story that reminds me of is that about 2, 3 months ago, my mom was up here visiting where we live, and a lot of the curbs and sidewalks here are not real level. You know, you have like
Right.
the old tree roots that kick up the curb, sometimes 3, 4 inches. And so my mom's very active. She likes to walk. And those 4 balance sets that I just mentioned, she can ace all of those, no problem. She can even do single leg balance pretty well, which for a 60, I don't know, she is 69, I think, 69-year-old woman. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
But she's walking on the curb. She looks over because my kids are riding their scooters or whatever, and she trips, catches her
Yeah.
toes, and goes all the way down.
Mhm.
Luckily, Sue, she didn't hit her face. She didn't
Yeah.
break anything.
Yeah.
She hurt her hand a little bit. She has RA. But honestly, a fall like that could really lead to the end for somebody because it's not that uncommon, especially for an older woman, to break a hip. You know, on a fall like that, you go in for surgery. I mean, bad things happen in hospitals all the time. You get pneumonia, you get antibiotics, you don't recover, and a year or 2 later, you're gone. So it really can't happen that fast. So the point of my story was, though, my mom then came in for PT, and she's working with our neurological specialist PTs, and they can do really high level balance with her. So she's doing things where she's, you know, stepping over objects and turning her head, and they're interrupting her, and it's a busy environment. So there really is that next level of balance. So for some people, you just want to get to a basic level where, you know, you just stay in control and you're good. But for some people, they want to get to that next level where they really can be active. And now she's hiking, and, you know, it's much more enjoyable for her because that's what she wants to do.
Right.
So that was just, I guess, again, another just kind of random story, is that really there are some really cool ways to take it to the next level if you want to.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah.
Good.
And tons of stuff we can do. So, you know, we get creative.
What would be the next step for a person like myself? Would it be that to come in and that free evaluation thing that you do? Would that be the next step, or do I need a doctor referral for balance issues? I'm on Medicare, and what's the next step for a person?
Yeah, great question. That's actually next on my worksheet. So that's perfect. Yeah, so 2 options basically. So kind of like 2 routes into the clinic if you want to improve your balance. If you know for sure that you want to improve your balance and you've got a good impression of us, and you say, let's just get the ball rolling, most of your insurances will require a referral. So
Okay.
we take all of the Medicare plans. We take almost every insurance, but if you're not sure on your insurance, you can always call and just ask whoever answers the phone to say, hey, are you in network with this one? The only one that I know we're not in network with is there's certain Kaiser plans that we've just never had a contract with.
Oh, right.
But everything
Okay.
else, the different Med Advantage plans, the Primera plans, all this stuff,
Yeah.
we're in network with. So that's the most direct route. And
Okay.
if you'd rather come in and just meet the therapist first and just kind of get a feel for if they think that they can really help you, you could certainly do a free visit at the clinic. We typically call them free discovery visits. It's
Right.
30 minutes with a PT. They talk to you about your history. They take you through like some basic testing, and they'll tell you, you know, what's going on, what's the root causes of your balance, and then they'll tell you what it would look like for us to be able to help you.
Okay.
So those are kind of like your 2 options. I think whatever you're more comfortable with. Yeah.
Okay.
But I can
Well,
tell you, we have some of the best therapists I've ever seen when it comes to balance right now. And they also run our pool therapy program too. So if you've got like chronic pain, or something that, you know, the pool would be more advantageous for you, they're the same therapist in the pool. They do a ton of work with Parkinson's right now too. So Walter, I'm not sure if you've done much treatment, but they're doing a lot. And I think we're the only clinic in town that actually does group Parkinson's programs. On land. So they do that twice a week, and they've got like 5 or 6 people in a group and then 3 therapists. And that's been hugely successful for people with Parkinson's too. So we've got some cool stuff going on when it comes to balance.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Yes, it is. But the best thing you can do for Parkinson's, hands down, and your neurologist will say the same thing, is exercise. The best thing. And, you know, when we put you in a group and there's a little more socialization and there's a little more
Mhm.
energy and,
Mm.
you know, camaraderie. It just makes it easier. And then it's also a nice little break for the spouses too. So most of the time the spouses, they probably go over to Starbucks or something because it's right down the block, you know. So it's a nice little get together for those spouses, and they can exchange information and talk about resources and support, or they can just complain about their spouses for an hour, you know, whatever floats their boat.
Yes, for sure.
That would never happen.
Okay, that's
All
really
right.
good.
Awesome. Well,
Okay.
I'm gonna stop the recording for now, but
That's great.
thank
Thank
you
you
all for
for-
being on here, and I'll stick around for a couple more questions if anyone has any. So if you have more questions,
Thank
just stick
you.
around. Yeah.